Yeah, it's on my mind, on my mind.
On my mind.
Always on my mind.
On my mind. Everything we do, everything we say, keep it moving in a better way.
Yeah, it's on my mind.
On my mind. On my mind.
On my mind.
Stand proud. On my mind. Yeah. On my mind.
Let me ask you something. Why is it so easy to say, I'm tired, but so hard to say, I'm not okay mentally? And even when people do say it, why do we get judged for it? Today, we're talking about something that affects more people than we realize: mental health stigma. Welcome to On My Mind Chat Unmuted. I'm your host, Stacey Lee. This space is all about real conversations, the one we don't always have openly, but probably should. And for this first episode of season 2, we're getting into a topic that has been coming up again and again, and not just in my own life, but in conversations with so many people: mental health stigma. Not just in one place, not just in one culture, but across the board. Today, I'm joined by 3 professionals who each bring a very important perspective to this conversation. First, we have Malanne Slater Coleman, a licensed independent clinical social worker and therapist based in the United States. Malanne works with individuals and couples navigating challenges such as anxiety, stress, life transitions, and relationship dynamics. Her approach is collaborative, client-centered, and grounded in evidence-based practices, creating a supportive and non-judgmental space where people can better understand themselves and build healthier coping strategies. Thank you for joining us, Malanne.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. We also have with us Schloss, a clinical psychologist who is based in Jamaica. Kyle brings a strong clinical perspective to the conversation, with a focus on understanding how mental health challenges develop and how they present and how they can be effectively addressed through early recognition and appropriate support. His work helps to bridge the gap between what people experience and what is happening from a psychological standpoint, making complex concepts more accessible and practical for everyday understanding. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you. Greetings.
Okay. And we also have with us Yvette Boucher Gardner, a counseling psychologist based in Jamaica. And Yvette brings a strong understanding of how mental health is shaped not only by individual experiences, but also by the environments we grow up in, including family, culture, and community. Her work focuses on helping individuals navigate emotional challenges while also examining the social patterns and beliefs that influence how people think about and respond to mental health. Thank you, Yvette, for being here with us.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Awesome. I'm really happy to have all 3 of you here, and I'm looking forward, and I'm sure our chatters are looking forward to the conversation that we're going to be having today. So let's get right into it. We're going to start, and I want again for this conversation to be as real as possible so that our listeners can really relate to it. So, why do people treat mental health like weakness? Because apparently you can be stressed, tired, overwhelmed, but the moment you say, I'm not okay, suddenly it's a problem. Yvette, help us unpack this. What does mental health stigma actually look like in everyday life?
Mental health stigma can look like so many different things in everyday life. In fact, it is not necessarily loud, shouting, here I am, stigma. But it can be simple things like an unwillingness to acknowledge that someone is experiencing overwhelm, or someone is not necessarily okay mentally. It can look like an internalized perception, where I am the individual experiencing mental health challenges, and I believe that something is wrong with me. Therefore, I am fearful or hesitant or outright reluctant to address it, to share it, to try to get help, because I am less of a person, because I'm having this experience. It could also look like workplace messages. What are the messages that are communicated in our workplaces? If you report sick, for example, and it's not a physical ailment, then something could be wrong with you, or you're not ready for work. It could look like what is portrayed or conveyed in social media, in mainstream media. It could look like fear. It could look like overfunctioning. It could look like so many different things.
Oh my goodness. So this is, there are so many faces of mental health stigma in our world today. So in Kyle, I want to bring you in. So are people almost trained to ignore what they're feeling?
Pretty much. So when we look at even the process of socialization, especially as Jamaicans, how we look at mental health is from the point of view of madness, so what we call mad people. So the people of unsound mind are just people who are homeless, and they might not be as clean as us. They might, for not having the means to eat out of the garbage bin and things of this nature. And from the very onset, they have come to say that these people are mad people, and they associate all individuals with mental illness to this kind of image. So from then, no one wants to admit having any kind of mental health challenge, because that is the visual that you get mentally when you think about anyone who has a mental illness. So from that standpoint, you realize that people want to disassociate with anything that has to do with mental health. And therein lies the beginning of the stigma against mental health.
Interesting. But Malanne, from your perspective, how does the stigma actually feel for the person going through it?
I think that stigma often feels like being unseen, right? Especially from my experience. Being unseen, being misunderstood at the same time. It's when you finally express something vulnerable. You finally express yourself. You demonstrate emotional vulnerability, and then instead of feeling supported by someone, you feel dismissed instead, right? You feel dismissed, you feel minimized. Over time, what that does is it can make someone shut down emotionally. And what I often see clinically is that people don't stop needing support. They just stop asking for it. They wait until crisis happens, when that should not be. You can seek help at the point of discomfort when something does not feel quite right. It's okay to do that.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things we want to bring out by having this conversation today. I want to bring in something real, because I know somebody listening has experienced this. I told my manager I was struggling mentally, and now I feel like they see me as weak and unreliable. Kyle, you want to answer for us? Why does being honest about mental health get interpreted as weakness?
In the context of the workplace, if you're not seen as mentally well or mentally fit, then that means you're unproductive. It's a negative association that is made with admitting that you have some kind of mental health challenge. It's not something that is seen in the same light of a physical ailment, which if you're feeling ill, if you're having flu-like symptoms, you go to the doctor so you can get well. But when you're feeling burnt out, when you're feeling high stress levels, when you're feeling anxious, these things which obviously affect your ability to function within the workplace, they're not taken as seriously.
Okay.
And I think it's since COVID that we've actually seen a whole difference where that is concerned now, because it's become so much more normalized. I don't want to preempt the conversation, but yeah, that's what I see.
Malanne, your take on such situations?
Similarly, as what Kyle says, yes, how you show up in the workplace, you have to demonstrate strength, right? Especially coming from the culture, the Caribbean culture. We emphasize strength. We see it as a good thing. But when if we're experiencing something mentally, it's seen as, okay, that's not a good thing. We're not seen as being as productive as someone who might not have those struggles. And so I do agree with Kyle that can be an issue.
Yvette?
Interestingly, there is a close family member who recently had to complete an application in North America. And one of the questions was asked, do you have mental health issues or challenges? And that relative was freaking out, not wanting to indicate that, yes, I do have a challenge or a problem.
Wow.
Because I fear that if I do that, it's going to be held against me. And I believe that would have come from the Caribbean context, where perhaps I don't know the reasoning for that question in a North American context.
I tell you, I don't know what I would have done if I saw that on a job application.
Right. But, a part of what we have spoken about, I've heard us so far, is about the normalizing. It has to be where we get to the place as a people, as supervisors, as managers, where we begin to normalize that in the same way that someone can be physically unwell, they can also be mentally unwell. And we say that there is no good health without good mental health. So it behoves us, even in supervisory position, to educate ourselves and to begin to move away from that place where we support our employees to enhance the very productivity which we see.
We're aiming for.
Yes.
Yes. And to Yvette's point, I think in the U.S. it's moving further to normalization. But there is still that space where vulnerability is still misunderstood in the workplace, right? And in reality, being able to name your mental health, I think it's a form of self-awareness rather than a weakness. But I don't think in the Caribbean context, we're catching up to that just yet. We need to, it's also important though in pointing out to the person, they don't have to declare their mental health status, right? So boundaries can be emphasized in that way.
Okay.
But we also, it's normal to have that fear because of how we grew up, because of how we were socialized. But definitely their experience is valid for sure.
Kyle?
Yeah, another thing I just remembered is that when it comes on to mental health challenges, it's not something that you can see. So oftentimes it's not something that persons can readily identify how severe it is. So they tend to downplay its effect. So it's not like a broken leg or a broken arm or a bruise on your head or something tangible that they can actually see and assess and can say, well, okay, based on the severity of that particular injury, I can understand why you're not able to function at work. But when I say, well, I'm feeling burnt out or I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling just out of it, they can't readily relate to that. Yes. They can't readily appreciate that. So it's lost on them the actual effect that it has, especially in our work setting.
Before we move into our next segment of this episode of On My Mind Chat Unmuted, let's show some love for one of our panelists and the work that they're doing. Malanne Slater Coleman has her book available on Amazon. 31 Days to a Merry Modern Marriage, a couple's daily guide and journal for a healthier, happier, long-lasting, and more authentic relationship. You may also reach out to Malanne for counseling and consultation. Her social media handles are available in the description of this episode.
Yeah, it's on my mind, on my mind.
On my mind.
Always on my mind.